Welcome. Today we're going to look at the difficult and challenging task of defining religion. We're going to first look at the types of definitions of religion, and then we're going to explore some of the major components of religion. The first thing to say is that religion is a difficult terrain to seek to navigate and define. Everyone has their own ideas of what religion means to them, and they are very personal and often have a lot of emotional and spiritual significance for people. Some definitions of religion are too broad. An example of this might be Paul Tillich's definition of that which is of ultimate concern. Religion is, according to Paul Tillich in one of his writings, religion is that which is of ultimate concern. As you can imagine, that could include any number of things. It could include religion. It could also include maybe an obsession or a hobby, a sport or a fandom. And so some definitions can include things that we might normally not think of as religion. Other definitions of religion are too narrow. An example of this might be a dictionary type definition. Religion is the worship of a god or gods. This seems to encapsulate an important component of some religions, but other religions are left out when one limits it to the worship of a deity. For example, Buddhism. Traditionally, Buddhism is a non-theistic religion, that is, a religious tradition that doesn't center around the worship of a deity. The Buddha is looked at as a revered teacher and someone who can show you the way to gain enlightenment, but one must do the work of the religion on one's own in order to experience awakening or enlightenment. So the definition of the worship of a god or gods might not include Buddhism in its parameters. I'd like to talk about two general types of definitions of religion. The first is a functional definition, functional type of definition of religion. That is, what does religion do? What needs does it meet for individuals as well as for a culture? So a functional definition would focus on how religion impacts the community. Maybe it might focus on the idea of religion as a means of social control, or religion as a means of finding community and belonging. This is the functional aspect of religion. A substantive definition of religion might focus on the components of a religion. What makes up a religion? There is a man a scholar whose name was Ninian Smart, and he came up with the idea that there were 7 different components or dimensions of religion. But I think in order to simplify, we could narrow those 7 components down to 3. And those 3 general components would be creed, code, and cultus. To look at each a little bit more in depth, let's start with creed. Creed includes things like belief, statements of faith, sacred texts, which could be written or could be oral, stories that are passed down from generation to generation. Statements of faith are what we often think of when we hear the term creed. Maybe some examples like the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. In Buddhism, you have the triple gem. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Creed. In Islam, you have the Shahada. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. All examples of creed or statement of faith. Code has to do with the moral or behavioral or ethical guidelines of a religious tradition. It might include things that are taboo or forbidden. It might include guidelines for what to wear, what not to wear, what to eat, what not to eat. It could include moral and ethical codes like the Code of Manu or um, the Ten Commandments or the Five Precepts of Moral Behavior in Buddhism. So, code has to do with guidelines for behavior and ethical and moral principles, things that people value are part of code. Cultus, finally, is the communal or ritual component of religion. And this could be festivals, holidays, gathering for worship on a Sunday morning or a Sabbath service in a synagogue. It could be gathering around a fire and engaging in a sacred dance or a chant. Devotional practices like prayer, meditation, pilgrimage are all part of cultus. So when we look at religious traditions this week, and when we look at movements that we are trying to discern, is this a religion or is this not a religion? These components of religion can help guide us as we try to analyze whether something is or isn't, in our view, a religious tradition. One of our activities for this week is going to be a discussion forum in which we pick something. I've provided several options, and as a group, as a class, we engage in a discussion of whether or not this is a religion. There is no right or wrong answer. This activity is designed for you to think about what makes something a religion versus something that is maybe an obsession or a fandom or a hobby. And is there a line which is crossed when one of those things takes on a dimension that is similar to, comparable to religion? So I look forward to exploring this whole subject of defining religion a little more deeply with you this week. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. You can contact me by email or you can contact me by text. And I look forward to discussing this more together.